moving on to the next thing. Next thing is nuclear Armageddon, because yeah, shit's getting spicy over in Russia and Ukraine right now. So essentially, what's happened up to this point is Russia thought they were going to steamroll through Ukraine, like America did to Iraq, and just like demolish the military the military effectiveness of Ukraine and just blitz right through it and be able to annex the country into Russia, create a or bring a former Soviet state back into the fold of the Russian Empire, and get away with it scot free. And it turns out that the Ukrainians were having none of that and fought back like the Dickens. And as since this is the clearest example of an invasion for essentially zero justifiable justification, in modern times, the entire international community has either abstained from supporting the war in Ukraine or has outright denounced it, and has also contributed military aid, especially from the West. And Russia has found out that when the largest and wealthiest country on earth spends $780 billion a year on the military and doesn't have universal health care, we have a lot of toys to spend. And that's what's basically happened in Ukraine, is the Ukrainians really don't want to be invaded by Russia. Like, really don't want to be invaded by Russia. The Russian Empire has done awful things in Ukraine for hundreds of years. And the Ukrainians just recently, like at the fall of the Soviet Union, got their country back and became a country. And now Russia's trying to annex them again. And the Ukrainians are like, no, fuck off. And so they've been getting aid from the United States, and the United States has toys for days to give away, because when you build military surplus supplies with no intention of ever using them, when the time comes along where you can create a political alliance and let some of your toys off the hook to another country, the other country, the adversarial country, finds out just how deep the toys go in the U.S., and that is what has happened in the United States, or in Ukraine. The Ukrainian military has been playing with a lot of NATO and U.S. toys, and it has caught Russia with their pants down. And the Ukrainians are taking back just huge swaths of territory. We'll see if we can pull that up. Ukrainian territory map. Let's see. Okay, so here. Russia tried to make it all the way to Kyiv over here in the initial days of the war, and they couldn't get there. The Ukrainians fought back like absolute fiends and staved off a what the? I hear a noise in my ear, and I don't know what it was. Oh, hi, Randy Bell. How's it going, man? That's the first time I've heard that noise. Thanks for joining the chat. I like people in chat. It's always fun. So right now we're talking about Ukraine. Yeah, I'm a new streamer. Yeah, I don't have much of a setup. I just I got a lot of thoughts, trying to get some thoughts off my brain. Talking politics and stuff, hoping it takes off, but I'm lacking on the equipment and lacking on the polish of the stream, but I like talking about stuff. It's fun. So anyway, we're talking about the potential nuclear Armageddon we're all heading towards. Right now we're covering the vastness of the American military supplies that we can ship all over the world at the drop of a hat, because Russia's finding out what happens when the country that spends $780 billion on the military every year decides to dip into their pockets a little bit. Not saying it's good, just saying it's impressive. So anyway, all these purple regions here is what this is the front line that Ukraine has pushed Russia back to, and Russia has since, because they're losing the war at the moment. Well, not losing it; they still have a lot of territory, but they're rapidly losing territory at the moment. So it could shift pretty quickly to them losing the war. Yeah, not gonna lie, I haven't kept up with all this. Yeah, it's hard to stay on top of it. The only reason I can do it is because I work 10 hours a day at my job, and I run the news. Like 6 or 7 different news videos. Shoot, start that over. I run 6 or 7 different news channels on YouTube on my speaker at work, so I get a mix of everything. But yeah, it's hard to keep up with all this stuff. So, but essentially, what's happened recently is Russia has annexed all of this red and purple territory. They've claimed that this is now Russia, and any attacks that happen upon that area, which obviously they would because the front line is in those areas at the moment, is tantamount to attacking Russia itself and will be subject to all of the retaliation that would go along with attacking a farm 5 miles outside of Moscow, which is scary because Russia has nukes, and they don't have as sophisticated nukes as the U.S. does, but they have big nukes. The largest nuclear explosion ever set off was set off by Russia. It was called the Tsar Bomba, and it was like 2.5 times the size of Castle Bravo, which was the largest nuclear explosion that the United States ever set off. The Tsar Bomba explosion was so big that it sent shockwaves that were picked up on earthquake monitors 2 times. The shockwave traveled around the world twice and was picked up on seismic or seismometers around the world. The mushroom cloud reached space. It was massive. And the scary thing about it was they didn't even set off the full bomb. It was the original yield of the bomb was estimated to be about twice what they actually set off, and the engineer that engineered the bomb was literally afraid he was going to set the atmosphere on fire, so he pulled his punches and didn't actually set the whole bomb off. And then, by accident, the bomb actually ended up being a lot bigger than they thought it was going to be. Now, it didn't set the atmosphere on fire, but boy, it's a good thing he decided not to set the whole thing off because it worked way better than they thought it was going to. So, yeah, Russian nukes are scary. They are nothing to be trifled with. Russia is not. They've proven that they're not the world superpower in traditional military operations anymore, but that nuclear arsenal is not a joke. And right now, the United States is Ukraine. Ukraine is obviously doing what is best for Ukraine right now. Nobody can sit there and deny that Ukraine is acting reasonably and in its best interests to try to take back the territory and try to kick Russia out and try to break the back of the Russian military, because if they don't, this is just going to keep happening. That's just been the proof. Every time Ukraine thinks they're going to get out from underneath the boot of some country that has taken them over, Russia just comes waltzing right back in. It happens every time, and I think the Ukrainians are tired of it, and it makes perfect sense that they would try to push this war and try to push the narrative that they need to take their entire country back. Because if they can break the back of the Russian military without setting off nukes, they get to keep their country. And it would basically be permanent, because Russia is not financially stable enough to rebuild their military to superpower strengths of, say, China or the United States. They just don't have enough money. So if the Ukrainians can break the back of the Russian military, they've saved their country for good, for essentially good. The problem is when you start screwing around with the Russian military, you start screwing around with Russian nukes. And while Ukraine is justified in their response, the United States may not be, because we're flirting with nuclear annihilation, essentially. And as a country that is first and foremost responsible for what happens to America, it may end up being the less morally productive move and less what am I thinking of? The less consequentially productive move for the United States to keep supplying Ukraine if Ukraine is going to keep doing things like blowing up bridges. This is the bridge right here. This bridge on this screen. Sorry, that was the beginning of the boom. But this bridge here is the bridge that the Russians have built to connect this little bit of Russia here to the Crimean Peninsula that they annexed in 2014. Crimea, for all intents and purposes at this point, is Russia. In the eyes of the international community, it's still Ukraine, but functionally, Crimea is Russia. They have built up it's a hard area to defend with all these rivers, or it's an easy area for Russia to defend with all these rivers and stuff right here where the peninsula reaches the land. There's a lot of waterways in there. There's a lot of easily defensible crossings. And then it's right next to Russia right here. So they could annex this entire bit right here without much pushback from Ukraine, because they can't really get to it. There's the nice line of easily defensible positions right here. And Ukraine will probably never take Crimea back. The international community still considers it Ukraine, but for all intents and purposes, it's Russia. So, but you'll see the only way in and out is by boat or the bridge that's right here. And the Ukrainians have blown it up. They have blown it up good. So that's the explosion. This is the aftermath. Just a massive explosion. Took the whole bridge out. Well, that part of the bridge at least. And it's a major blow to the Russian military effort, because a lot of their staging grounds are in Crimea, and that bridge was their way in and out. The whole reason they built it, it's the longest bridge in Europe, and the whole reason Russia built it is so they could get supplies in and out of Crimea, and somebody blew it up. Now, Ukraine denies that this was them, and Russia seems to think that a semi driving from the Russian side in the east across the bridge to Crimea in the west exploded. So they think it was an act of sabotage. But the international community is not so sure, because things explode sometimes on bridges. It's happened before, and usually when things explode on a bridge, the bridge will usually not collapse, because bridges are designed to take downward loads, and they're designed to take wind shear from the side. It's the upward force, it's the uplifting force upon the bridge that they're usually not designed to take. So the easiest way to bring down a bridge would be to blow it up from underneath. That's why when you blow anything up, you usually blow it up from the bottom and let the whole thing collapse. So as a result of it, you can see here they'll circle it. Right there. You see that little wake? And then boom. Okay, so the suspicion from the international community is even though Russia is claiming it was a terrorist attack from a truck driving over and exploding, the international community suspects that may not be the case. They suspect that the truck may have just happened to have been on that part of the bridge when the detonation went off. because Ukraine has been caught using. I say caught like it's a bad thing. They're probably justified in this, but they've been caught using drone ships, so tiny little boats, basically the size of a kayak, but it's a drone. You remote control it and you drive it up, and they just fill them with explosives. And the Russians have released some pictures of it. It has not been confirmed by Ukraine or the international community that Ukraine is using these vessels, but given the fact that at this point Ukraine is fighting for the existence of their country, it's reasonable to assume that perhaps they have actually done this. Whether it was sanctioned by the Ukrainian government is another question, because this war in Ukraine is being fought mostly by just citizens of Ukraine. Like, they're getting military training. A lot of them are now in the military, but the Ukrainian citizens really don't want Russia there. So it's perfectly reasonable to assume that some of them would get angry enough to do something like this. And this is a very good target to target. So, it could be a Ukrainian terrorist attack. Well, it would be a terrorist attack if it was intended to, terrorize civilians. This would be just an act of war, basically, which Russia started a war, so, bridges get blown up in wartime. But I don't want to frame it the way Russia does. Russia frames it as terrorism, but I'm saying terrorism because that's all I've been reading all day is how Russia calls it terrorism, but I don't consider it terrorism. It's just warfare. But anyway, so the response to this has been Russia launched 84 missiles, not nukes, just missiles at Ukraine, and killed 14 people as a result, and hit several electrical stations. They hit a geothermal station, I think, and they hit water supply and the entire city of, which one was it? This is probably not the page that was on. I think Ukraine maps. Which one was it? I want to say it was Kharkiv, but I'm not sure. One of the cities on this list here was hit by the missiles, and the entire city lost power. Now 90% of the power has been restored, and all of the water went out. They blew up they did a bunch of damage to the water treatment facility. Now apparently 70% of the city now has water, 90% of the city now has electricity, according to Ukraine. But Russia launched 84 missiles at Ukraine, all over the country. They hit basically every major city in Ukraine, all because of this bridge attack. And you can see here's just.
This is the first time missiles have landed right.
Just devastation wherever they landed. 14 people have died. Over 1,000 have been injured. And Putin is basically saying that if you keep attacking Russia, which he's considering Russia, the stuff that he's said is Russia. So this bit in red here, even though it's not Russia, he said it's Russia. He says if you keep attacking this part, then things will escalate. And he has also not taken off the table nuclear weapons. And it is unclear what happens in the international community if Russia uses nukes. Does the rest of the world retaliate? If they retaliate, what do they retaliate with? If Russia takes the can off the lid off the nuclear Pandora's box, like what happens next? And nobody really knows what happens next. There isn't a good answer for this, because you don't want to let countries use their nuclear arsenal to blackmail the rest of the world, essentially, and to letting them do whatever they want. But at the same time, nuclear weapons create a unique instance where like the actual end of the world is possible, and that is not hyperbole. Like the United States by itself has enough nuclear weapons to turn essentially any country it wants into a solid sheet of glass. And that is not a joke. When nuclear bombs go off, they literally turn the ground below them into glass. And the United States has the ability to basically glass every country on Earth. Pick one. Doesn't matter which one it is. We can blow the whole thing up. And Russia doesn't have quite that capability, but they have close to it. So do the British. So does the French. China does. North Korea doesn't have that capability, but they do have nukes. And Germany, I don't know if Germany has nukes or not. Doesn't matter. Regardless, NATO countries that are in NATO, are all like obligated to come to each other's defense. So if nukes go off in Ukraine, that's the end of the Ukrainian war, right there. If Putin sets off nukes in Ukraine, the Ukrainian war is over. The Ukrainian people will not be able to fight that. There's no way around it. So the question becomes, does the United States just wash our hands of the situation and just let Russia have it? Let Russia turn Ukraine into a pit? What are they going to do? What's the international community going to do about the nuclear fallout for that? You know? Is it going to be like Japan, where just nuking 2 cities is enough to end the war? Or is Ukraine going to fight until the bitter end? You know, what happens? How do you treat Russia at that point? These are not easy answers, and nobody has the answers. So, you know, it's a scary time. We're living in. This is legitimately the closest we have come to nuclear Armageddon since the Cuban Missile Crisis. Now, Russia doesn't have any nukes pointed at the United States right now, and the United States doesn't have any nukes pointed at Russia, but Russia is behaving very poorly, and it is ruining a lot of things across the world because they're fucking with oil supplies. Ukraine is the breadbasket of Europe. They produce an absolutely buttload of grain for the rest of the world. The Ukrainian flag has the yellow over the blue, or the yellow under the blue, I mean. The yellow represents the wheat fields and the blue represents the sky. That's what their flag literally is. It's wheat fields and sky. That's how important that is to the Ukrainian economy. And they export grain to the entire world. So food prices are going up in countries everywhere because Ukraine can't ship grain out. So Russia's fucking up a lot of shit here. But when nukes are involved, the game changes. Like, it's that sort of like, you know, and Poland has said that they want American nukes in America for in case Russia decides to get a little too close to Poland with a nuclear weapon. Poland is in NATO, so if anything happens to Poland, it's game over. So, anyway, I think I made my point.